This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Welcome to From Guilt to Good, Self-Care Solutions for Busy Caregivers, the podcast rewriting the narrative of self-care. If you're a caregiver feeling stretched thin, torn between responsibilities, and longing for self-care, you're in the right place. I'm Jeanette Yates, fellow caregiver and someone who spent years doing all the self-care things and never really feeling any better. After years of research, self-exploration, and trial and error, I finally found a way to create a sustainable self-care practice that made me feel good, not guilty. In From Guilt to Good, we'll explore how you can do that too. Together, we'll hear expert insights, actionable steps, and heartfelt stories to guide you toward rediscovering your worth, reclaiming your health, and getting back the life you've been too busy or exhausted to enjoy. Today on the podcast, we'll be hearing from a member of the Self-Caregiver Community, Jodie Pearson, who'll share with us about her unique caregiving experience and her journey of self-care through it all. Jodie's career, spanning over 45 years, was approached with a foundation of service to others. No matter the position held, and even into retirement, Jodie's passion was and is to bring knowledge, experience, and tons of encouragement to others. She often describes herself using terms like great pep-talker, which I can attest to, self-reinventor, which I love that too, Jodie, I gotta say. Self-mindset creator and challenger. Wow, I want to dive into some of that when we get into it. Jodie's first experience with personal caregiving was at the age of 25 when she took care of her father after his leg was amputated. She has since survived the loss of her mother and father, all four of her older siblings within an 18-month period, and the suicide of her former husband. She currently supports her husband, who lives with rapidly increasing limitation of motion and the constant pain that comes with rheumatoid arthritis. As a family caregiver, Jodie has felt both on top of the world as well as defeated and depleted. It is through these ups and downs she has created self-care tactics that she refers to as reinventing herself by challenging herself to think differently as needed. And that is why we are welcoming you on the podcast today. Welcome, Jodie.
Thank you so much.
Listen, like we were talking about before I hit record, when you and I first met, we met in online, and I asked her about her caregiving experience, and she goes, "We just need to hop on a call."
Yeah.
We didn't even try to message back and forth. We just hopped on a call, and I just fell in love, Jodie, with your passion and your spirit and your heart. And I know that you're going to be an encouragement to our listeners today. And so really, I just want to dive in. First of all, did I hit all the high points with your bio? I want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, you did. I mean, it pretty much sums up my caregiving, or my life's passion has turned out to be serving others, really. And that's not everybody's gift, and I want to acknowledge that.
Yes.
But there's things that we can do to, subsidize that lack of being able to be the best, or have the gifted caregiving, gift of caregiving, because not everybody has it, which could make it more difficult and more stressful.
Right.
But again, your purpose, Jeanette, is to teach us how to take care of ourselves.
That's right. So
that we can adjust.
Right. And understanding everybody has a different capacity for caregiving. Like you said, for you, it is a gift. It is a passion. It is a joy. For others, it's like square peg, round hole type of situation. It's very complicated. And then there's all sorts of in-betweens, right? And so I love that you acknowledged that, even, because a lot of times when we have a gift, we don't recognize that not everyone has that. And so I love that you just from the get-go, I remember you saying that to me too, like, I have this gift, but a lot of people don't. So I really appreciate that. So as I mentioned in the intro, you have quite the long caregiving resume. And so I want you to kind of talk a little bit about that caregiving experience. You have the unique benefit of caring, benefit and challenges, right? There's both of caregiving for both your parents and your siblings. And so that's a unique experience. I'd love for you to dive into that a little bit.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Everybody's different. So I made a couple of notes here just to kind of keep me on track. So just starting with my daddy, which I mentioned when I was about 25, he had his leg amputated and he needed to have physical therapy and someone to take him to and from. And he was actually in the middle of a divorce when that happened. And so somehow I thought, hey, I could do it. And I had acquired 3 weeks vacation at work. I took my 3 weeks vacation and I spent it at his house. I went home on the weekends and then I came back and I took him to therapy. And it was fascinating for me, to see how they taught him to do things differently. And then we would come home and we would practice at home and things like that. But he would later be divorced and live on his own. So my sister Susie and I, now there are 5 of us kids,
right?
But Susie and I were the ones who stepped up. And, my brother was a heroin addict at the time. My other sister was getting her master's degree and going out country western dancing on the weekends.
Right.
And my other sister was looking for love and, so they had their own lives. And one thing that I wanted to share was how we are all different.
Yeah.
And we don't all have the same capacity, as you mentioned, for caregiving. It just isn't going to be like that. One thing I always say is, look, I can sit and have a conversation with you and I can encourage you, but can I watch a room full of kids?
Right.
No.
Right.
I just can't do it. I'll be pulling my hair out.
Right.
So that's a great example of, I'm good at this or I'm not good at that.
Right.
And even my own mother thanked me for taking care of my sister, Sam. Yeah. She says, I don't think I could do what you're doing. And that's her daughter.
Yeah.
So it's okay. And it's really, really important to understand that other people don't have the same capacity that you have. So with Susie and I, we teamed up. Susie, what was she good at?
Yeah.
What was I good at?
Right.
So that was really important to figure out what were our specific gifts in that role. I'm more financial. I took care of the finances, the doctor's appointments, all that kind of thing. And Susie, she would go to the store and she'd buy all kinds of food and then she would cook it all up and I would be her assistant. And we would, label it and put it all in the freezer at his place. And then when it came time to find a home, I did that. Right. And then she would go with me to evaluate. So it's really important at the beginning when you make a decision. I mean, sometimes you don't really have a choice.
Right.
But when you know that it's something you're going to do, it's really important to stop and think about, what can I learn about this?
Right. Right.
What can I learn about taking care of somebody? How can I get support?
Right.
And so that was Daddy. And then my sister Sam was next. In fact, Sam is the one that came to me at my dad's memorial. She's 10 years older than me. And she said, Jodie, I feel so bad. I'm the oldest. I should be taking care of all this. And I just remember, because even at that age, somehow I knew we had different gifts.
Right.
He said, sis, first of all, you're not the oldest anymore. We're all the same. And it's okay. I got this.
Yeah.
It's okay. So she was feeling guilty and I wanted her to feel better.
Yeah.
And now those were the words I chose for her. So in a way, we really have to acknowledge again how important it is for ourselves too, to understand that other people can't step in the same way that you do. So now Sam would later develop early onset dementia. Fortunately, I had my husband to help me and we added on for her. And she lived with us for about 5 years. And again, that was a gift that I had. I just, for some reason, I knew exactly what she needed, exactly what she wanted. I took care of all of her finances. I took care of her condominium. And here's one thing I want to mention is that, when I go on the what's the name of the Facebook page that I met you?
Working Daughter.
Working Daughters. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I read so much stress about the family.
Yeah.
So much stress about not getting help. And that happened to me with my sister Sam, because she had a daughter who had 2 children and she was married. And I thought I was helping my sister, of course, but I thought I was helping her,
right,
her daughter. And she just didn't step up.
Yeah.
She doesn't remember it that way.
Right.
She did not step up. And, I self-diagnosed a mental breakdown over it.
Yeah.
My expectations of her were so normal to me.
Right.
They were normal. Come over, spend the night, have pizza, watch movie. We added on. There's an extra room. Come on. But it just didn't happen. And so that was a horrible, horrible experience with her because of the expectations that I had.
Right. And it's one of those things, we all fall into that trap. I do it too, although that's some of the big work I've done in my self-care journey, is not only letting go of expectations that others have on me, but if I want that for myself, I have to offer it to other people. And so my first inclination when I see somebody in the caregiving space that's not doing what you think is quote normal, or what they quote should be, I remind myself about capacity. You never know what someone's capacity is. You never know what they're dealing with emotionally, physically, maybe, all of those things. And I'm going to err on the side of, I'm going to give that person grace. Yeah. Because I think I know, oh, they're not doing that because they don't care enough, or they're selfish, or what. We want to label all these things, but I know that's not true of me when I, I know that about myself. And so I want to offer that same grace. And so I think that's
nice.
That's one of those things, because it's so easy to be why don't people just do the thing?
Yeah.
And
judgmental.
Yeah.
And I love that I just want to offer them grace. I mean, it's easier on yourself to do that also. So that's a form of self-care.
Yeah.
That right there, when you said, I want to offer that person where I'm thinking they just don't care.
Right.
I want to just offer them grace and say to myself, I really don't know what their situation is. Even though they act like everything's fine, or they're mean, or they're, whatever. It's too hard on us to, and sometimes they're even mean to us and ungrateful to us. And yeah, man, it can get worse and worse and worse. I want to go back for a second to Daddy, because talking about self-care, if I could interject that part with Dad, I like to encourage people to, whenever you get into a home, or someone's going into a nursing home or a care facility, see if they have a group that you can join. Because that was my first experience with my dad going into a home, and I went to the group. And the one thing I took away from that group, Jeanette, was that you have to watch out for yourself. You have to, this was a long time ago. And, find out what it is you can do. Right. And try not to overdo it. And so what I decided at the time, and what was okay at the time, was, while I was full-time working, I decided, okay, I'm going to call Daddy every day on my break.
Right.
Every day on my break. And I did. I sat there and called. The nurses would bring him to the phone exactly at 10 o'clock. I would call him at 10 o'clock. So you see what happened there, Jeanette, is I was taking care of me.
Right. And that is why self-awareness is so important. That's why, when I have worked with people one-on-one, it's the very first thing you have to do is you have to be aware of even how you're feeling, what your capacity is, all of those things first before you can start setting boundaries and setting goals and all these things. You have to start with that self-awareness, because if you're not aware of your own capacity and how you feel, if every time you're with someone, you have a fight or flight response, that is a strong indicator that something is amiss, right? And so I just love that you kind of started with, these are all this, I can't do all of this, but I can do this one thing. And then you nailed it. You crushed it.
I did. I crushed it, girl. And so every day at 10 o'clock. And then I said, every Thursday, I'm going to go visit.
Right.
Because Thursday I was like 7 to 4 instead of 8 to 5. And it was very rewarding for me. Was it sometimes, did I sometimes feel obligated? Yeah, sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
You're going to have those feelings where I don't feel like it. And sometimes you might cancel. But, if you cancel, that's something you're doing for yourself. Because obviously, if you didn't cancel, you would be overloaded. So canceling is not necessarily a bad thing. So when you think about, I have to do this to take care of, it's almost like a mental health day.
Right.
When you call out sick from work. Like, I'm not really sick. I'm going to go shopping. Well, it's like a mental health day because you need a break from the office.
Well, and like sometimes what I've noticed too with my mom, like I see my mom a couple times of the week. Usually we talk on the phone every day. She's in a facility, so I know she's safe and well cared for, that kind of thing. But Saturdays is the day I go and we, have breakfast and, we chit chat and tell stories. Sometimes we paint fingernail, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And then sometimes, and literally every Saturday for the past year and a half, I have done this, except for when I was out of town with my family. I was sick because that's not good, right? We don't want to do that. Right. And then there's been a couple days where I'm like, Mom, this week I'm doing this, and this. I just need to stay home on, Saturday morning.
Get caught up.
Yeah. Or just sleep in or whatever. Yeah. And being honest about that, I think that's really scary for a lot of people because depending on the relationship with you have with your parent, if they have dementia and how that's impacting their mood and attitude, that may not be well received.
Exactly. And so that's kind of maybe some words that are going through your head. When I'm thinking about sleeping in and not coming through, maybe it's a person who's going to make me feel bad about it. Maybe my loved one is going to say, well, you don't even care about me. Right. Why is that so important? And I'm not. So learning to anticipate that can happen and knowing that that's their thing, not your thing. I mean, Mom, I understand how you're feeling. I totally get it. It's not true.
Right.
And I do a lot of whining. Well, I learned to whine because I worked with the public for 100 years. It's not true. Right. I'm not a bad person, but.
Well, and I've learned that I don't have to justify to everybody, including my loved one. So I want them to be, I want to have their expectations clear. So I don't want to not tell them I'm not coming. Right. That's rude. I wouldn't do that to anybody else. But, it's okay to say, I need a break. And and I sometimes have to say to my mom, and it doesn't mean I've forgotten you.
Yes,
and, and that's okay. But, I've found that when I am feeling at the end of my rope, sometimes I can push through. Like sometimes I'm like, you just got to do this one thing and then you can take a break. Sometimes it's okay to push through. However, in general, I have found that if you're like, you know what, in order for me to show up the way that they need me to show up, I'm going to take a break. Good. Like, I could come on Saturday morning, but I'm going to be exhausted. I'm going to be a little bit cranky. I'm going to be, that's not what they need. They need my presence, my time and attention, not my bad attitude. Right. And so, we have to ask for what we need. You mentioned this at the beginning. You were like, you have to, take time here. You have to take care of yourself. You are the one that has to care about yourself enough to take care of yourself. And though I say it's not so that you can be a better caregiver, it's because you're a person and you're worthy of taken care of. However, the byproduct of tending to your own needs is that, you're you're a little bit nicer.
Yes, you're nicer. That's good. That's super good. I would have put your long sentence after that, but that's really what the bottom line.
It's your capacity is better. You're able to think clearly, all of those things.
Right. I always use that analogy where you're on an airplane, and I'm sure you've heard this.
Yeah.
And you're in an emergency and the oxygen mask comes down. What do they say?
Yeah.
Put it on yourself first.
Right.
And then put it on your child or the person next to you, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to help anyone else. So that's really a great visual. Put on your self-care mat, your oxygen.
Yes.
And then you can help anybody else. So if we're down in the dumps for any reason, what good are we to anybody? We're not very good.
Well, and and then I know we're only like halfway through your caregiving journey, but we're mixing in all the other stuff as we go along. So we're good. But I do want to, one of the things that I have really felt recently, because I'm caregiving for my mother, but I'm also part of a care team for another loved one of mine. And I was thinking about that oxygen mask thing the other day, because like you said, it's the most used analogy in the caregiving space.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I was with this person the other day, and I was sitting there and holding his hand, and I was thinking about that oxygen mask, Jodie. And I thought, you know what? It's important to put my oxygen mask on, not only so that I can put the oxygen mask on someone else, but also so I can be there for them when there is no oxygen mask.
Right.
There will come a time, depending on the situation of your caregiving, where there will be no other answers. There will be no other saving something dropping from the sky to save you, right? And if you've taken care of yourself, if you've done the work you need, for me, that's involved a lot of therapy. If you've done that work, you're going to be much better equipped for those times. And I think for me, that was an eye opener for me the other day. That happened literally just a couple days ago. I'm like, when there is no oxygen mask, you can still be here.
Yes.
Yes. And I know that's a similar, you've had to go through that no more oxygen mask available for your loved ones several times. So you've walked through that grieving process several times. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Now, when Daddy passed, I felt relieved.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay, because I've heard, and when I go through the Working Daughters Facebook page, I hear so much guilt and feeling bad for feeling good. And this is what your purpose is, Jeanette, is to help people to get from guilt to good. And there's so much guilt for feeling good. So I felt relieved, because why would I want my dad to keep living the way he was living? Right. He ended up at the end of his road and so forth. And they said, well, do you want us to keep feeding him? Well, no, we don't.
Right.
We don't. And why? I mean, how could you do that? It was hard. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't easy, and it was weird.
Right.
Like, I'm going to starve my father.
Yeah, it's hard.
But in the long run, it's just the best thing that we could do for him. The most
loving thing you can do.
The most loving thing we could do for him. So there was relief there. But listen, when it comes to grief, I strongly, strongly recommend finding some group to talk with. You know why? Because knowledge is power.
Right.
Knowledge can help you push old thoughts out and put new ones in. And this is how I reinvent myself. I'll go out searching for new thoughts and push the old ones out. And sometimes I literally erase them from my canvas. I never go back to that way of thinking. And it's really cool, because that's how you can sense yourself growing and changing and molding to what helps you. And all the choices that we make every day are designed, really, mine are designed to make me feel better. Now, that's not selfish, because making me feel better means I'm happier and I can be more of service.
Right.
So there's also that that stigma where, that you're so selfish, you're just doing that.
Right.
Well, So we have to be careful with that, knowing that if I'm doing things that are going to make me feel better, then I can be a better service to someone else. So keep that in mind as you go and get your nails done.
Right.
As
Well,
you go to the movie.
in the episode with Rachel that we did, she talked about how that was her 15 minutes was her nails. And so for her, it was a way for her to spend time in grief and memory of her mother. And, so on the outside, it looks like she's just sitting over there painting her nails, but really that's that was her meditation time, her time to ponder, her time to process. And it was only 15 minutes. But it was her time. And I love also that you talked about getting in community with other people going through what you're going through.
Yes.
And, there are caregiver groups out there. One of the things that makes the Self-Caregiver Facebook group a unique community is that while we're all caregivers, I'm here to help you take care of yourself, not take care of your loved one.
Right.
Although, like we've mentioned, it does have a byproduct of making, that better, but this is really about shedding those negative mindsets, those negative phrases that we tell ourselves. This is selfish. They need me more than I need me. I can get to myself when I'm done with everybody else, which that never happens. So I think if we start stacking all those priorities right there together, then nothing is a priority and everything falls through the cracks.
Yeah, so, that's a very good point.
And then I think too, that idea, we always talk about we're on the bottom of the list, when we're not taking care of ourselves. We always, caregivers are notoriously on the bottom of the list. We never get to the bottom. Therefore, we never get to ourselves. I don't expect people that start paying it, caregivers that start their self-care journey to go from bottom of the list to the tippy top, but let's maybe let's not keep it on the bottom. Let's move it. Let's move it up a notch, It's just a little bit. But one of the things that I think is so important about finding a group of people that are going through what you're going through, whatever stage of the caregiving journey you're in, if you're in that place where you're like, I need to pay more attention to myself, but I feel guilty about doing it. That's what the Self-Caregiver Community is for. But one of the things I learned when I was in recovery is, the lie is I must be a terrible person for thinking these things.
Yeah.
I must be the only person that thinks this.
Right.
What kind of person feels this way? Well, then you get in a group of people and you start sharing your experience in a safe place, that everybody, and guess what? You're not the only person thinking that. You're not the only person feeling this way.
But they all have, this is what helped me when that happened.
And then they can, that's right.
And that's when you get to the point where you're taking in the knowledge, you're picking and choosing, and you're pushing out the old idea and you're reinventing yourself by putting in the new idea. Now that's when you're gathering information from outside of you.
Right.
But there are also times when I hit the wall, and I call it when I come to the end of myself. And that's when I reinvent myself. So it's a feeling like, I've been dealing with this and dealing with this and dealing with this, and nothing's changing. It could be months or whatever. And then all of a sudden I will say to why didn't I think of this sooner? I go, look, I got to stop. I got to fix this. I got to stop. This is not working. Whatever I'm saying is not changing anything.
In my caregiving experience, there was not this big conversation where caregiving started, right? My mom's been sick since I was 8. I'm 48 now. It's been the way it has been, and it's changed a gajillion times, right? But there are a lot of times where something happens and like your dad had his leg amputated, the caregiving started, there was a conversation, decisions, things like that, similar to what happened with when you took care of your sister. So you're able to have those conversations and make plans. Sometimes you find yourself in the middle of a situation that is untenable. And you're like, I can't keep going on like this, but how do I stop this? How do I get off of this runaway train?
Yes.
And that is where, to your point, you can't just start screaming. We have to be able to figure out what we need to say, like what is the problem, and then what we can change and what we can't. So there's a lot of like, if they would just stop, or if they would just see this obvious thing that everybody else can see, we can never change anyone else's behavior.
Right.
We can only change our response to it. And I learned that in recovery. I learned that in therapy. I learned that in,
yes,
in all the different ways. But I think, like I remember setting my first boundary with my mother, which, by the way, did not happen until year 35 of her, like, it's not like there's been boundaries this whole time, but that, and I remember like setting that boundary, like, oh, look at me, I'm setting this boundary. Well, guess what? She didn't care about that boundary, and I'm not saying that to be flippant, but like that boundary was not her concern. Her concern was getting what she needed, and her, like, this needs to happen. When this needs to happen, I call my daughter and she comes. Well, what was going to change was I was no longer going to come. That's what I had told her. Well, guess what happened? I set the boundary. She needed the thing. She calls me. I jump in the car and I'm driving over there and I am mad. I am just about my boundary, not my boundaries being disrespected. And someone is not respecting my boundaries. My mom is not. And by the way, this wasn't an emergency situation. This was like a convenience thing, just for clarity, but not that y'all are judging me listening, but just in case. But anyway, this was like, and I'm driving over there and I'm all mad. And then I get there and I'm like, why am I mad at her? I'm the one that got in my car.
Oh, that's good.
I'm the one that broke the boundary. She didn't break the boundary. The boundary wasn't don't call me. The boundary was I'm not going to come for the XYZ, right? Mm-hmm. I'm the one that broke the boundary. And so then it was, then that's another example of realizing like, okay, this is, we can only change our behavior. And that goes for, we're talking about, lots of different things in this episode, but I think with your vast experience, Jodie, it's important to hit on all of this. Like you say, knowledge is power, and you have a lot of knowledge that you're sharing with us, but I think becoming students of ourselves and human nature makes caregiving a lot easier, because we begin to understand a little bit more about how we behave and why we behave the way we do, and how we can make an impact with changing our behavior, adjusting our behavior, our thoughts, our words that we say to other people. So that's really good. And I love that you talk about like when something's not working, we just reinvent. We just do that. I love that. So I love that.
I do too, because it has made me feel accomplished. Like I can accomplish this.
Yes.
And sometimes I create it myself, like the thing with Bill.
Yeah.
And there's a few examples like that in my marriage that I've done that with. And sometimes I go looking for help. So it could be either way. Right. And getting someone, like when I first joined Working Daughters, which by the way, everybody, is how I met Jeanette through that Facebook page. My first post was, I'm feeling defeated and depleted. I was taking care of my mom. And Jeanette, within 24 hours, I had 48 loving, caring responses. Wow. Right. Talk about people breathing life back into you. Yeah. So that's why you don't want to do these things alone. You just, and that was kind of a reinvent right there. I go, wait a minute. I'm sure there's a Facebook page I can get on. Yeah. Right. I'm sure I can. And so I searched and I found one. Yeah. So that was a brand new thing. Right. And from that point, I was able to listen and hear all the people's concerns and things like that. And of course I met you and that was, meeting you was just fantastic, because you're a whole nother world. You're addressing a whole nother world than people coming in saying, I can't, or I don't know what to do, or, you're talking to us. Right. Caregiver. Well, and I think that's, almost every, caregiver space out there, they do a good, they remind you, like, take care of yourself, but there isn't really anyone addressing, from what I, like, how
How do you set that boundary? How do you,
Right.
and listen, you can plug in the self-care things. You can do your nails, and you can take a mental health day, and you can, do a massage, or you can meditate or do yoga. You can do all those things, but if you feel guilty while you're doing it, it's not
Yes.
self-care. It's not.
Right.
And so that's why I'm really tapping into that. Let's address some of that stuff. And that means it's like, we're diving deep, but I think that's what's holding a lot of people back. They're like, why am I not feeling any better? Why do I, I feel like, or, I'm doing this because I want to, but then I feel like I have to justify it or make up for it or whatever. And it's like, no.
Or answer to someone who's judging you or criticizing you.
Right.
Like, how could you leave her?
Yeah.
Or how could you leave?
And it's frustrating because we want to change their behavior or their attitude or their words. And it's like, no, you've got to change your mindset about what those words mean,
Yes. And how you respond to it.
Right. Or
rather than reacting to it. So Jeanette, I can see why you're concerned that I had to leave Mom.
Yeah.
But I'm so tired.
Yeah.
And just be honest, like you said earlier, I'm so tired. I have to refuel.
Mm-hmm.
I have to refuel. I have to. Can you spot me? Do you think you could spot me and stop by?
Right.
An hour and a half.
And honestly, I try to do that. And like everybody's situation is different. Like sometimes you need to have somebody there for safety protocol and things like that. Like that's one of those things. So everybody's situation is different. But a lot of times we're doing things because we don't want to say no. We haven't thought about whether or not it's a safety issue, whether or not whatever, there's all that kind of stuff. And so one of the things that, we talk about in the group, and then when I'm working with people one-on-one, is, that's part of that capacity building or capacity defining is like, what is needed? And so for a long time, my job, quote, was what I thought my job was to make sure my mom was happy and she got everything she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked fine until the things that she wanted were, hindering the things that my family needed and I needed and wanted. Yeah. But also when it really got to be like, meh, 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 was when the things that she wanted were no longer safe for her. So instead of, I'm going to keep you happy and safe, I said, no. Now my job, and I had to have this conversation with her, and sometimes I still have to do this. My job is to keep you safe. And then it's not my job to make you happy. My job is to have a relationship with you. Like I'm your daughter. So I want to keep you safe and I want to be your daughter. Those are my two priorities right now. Right. And your priorities can change with caregiving. Your goals can change with caregiving. They can change with self-care, all of those things. But we have to have that self-awareness that we've been talking about. Now, this is like a mega episode, which I am loving. But one of the other things that you talk about, and you have a unique experience, and I want you to just hit some of the parallels, maybe things that are the same, maybe contrasting, because you've cared for a parents, siblings, and your spouse. And so I want you to talk about a little bit like how caregiving changes when the person you're caregiving for has a different relationship with you.
Right. For me, the caregiving aspect didn't really change. I mean, because it just was all stepping up to the plate, seeing what was needed.
Right.
And it was just, again, something that came natural to me. So I would just, face it head on. I think the differences were their personalities. Their personalities will make it different.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So Daddy was always very nice. Fortunately, my sister Sam was always very thankful. She was so gracious. That made it easy until she wasn't able to understand anymore and she became combative and things like that. My mom, she was a little bit of a challenge because She did accuse me of stealing a few things, which I've seen posted in the past. And that's kind of here you are giving your entire heart to someone and then they're going to accuse you of stealing their watch.
Right. But it's very common with people who are struggling with dementia and things like that and losing control in so many different ways. I think it's part of the thing. And I think part of it is being aware of that, like going in like, this is going to happen, it makes it less
reaching out if you're shocked by it and I never expected that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I never expected to be blamed for my former husband's suicide, but his parents found a way to blame me for it.
Yeah.
And I guess statistics show that that's normal.
Right. Right.
And to find that statistic, knowledge helped me not take it so personal. Man, it was crushing. Yeah. It was crushing because I was in love with his parents. But knowing the knowledge that that's what they do helped me to not, dwell on that. So the differences were not a whole lot, just their behaviors I think were different. But the way I approached them was I customized it to who they were and what they were saying. And, Mom, she needed a lot of encouragement. And so did Sam, my sister with dementia. So did my sister, Cindy. Cindy was, she was a bigwig in town. I mean, her husband owned a medical practice. She was 2 steps away from being a doctor. But all of a sudden her husband fell under alcoholism and their whole property went to pot. They had a big, big property in Texas. And so I took over their finances. She was in collections. It was just, so she was someone that I would call frequently.
Right.
And just wanted to hear her voice. What's up? What's going on, Cindy?
Yeah.
And then I would also try to keep her involved and participating on her own because I need you to make a phone call.
Yeah.
Okay. This is who you're going to ask for and partner with her so that I could say, way to go, and help build her confidence because everything was to pot and out of control. And so that was different. That's a form of caregiving.
Yeah, it really is. So finances. Yeah, not every caregiving situation looks the same. And a lot of times caregiving starts a lot like that, Jodie, where it's like, I'm just helping my parents with the bill, like figure out the bills and, organize because they're getting a little.
You're right.
And then next thing you know, you're in the middle. But I think that's, that is a form of caregiving. And that's a way a lot of caregiving starts is like, oh, I'm just doing the grocery shopping. Oh, I'm just helping prepare meals. Or I'm just doing the finances or something. And then it grows from there. So definitely, I wholeheartely agree. I also would imagine that the relationship that you have with each person, so your spouse, the relationship you have with your spouse, the caregiving duties may be the same, right? Like I'm going to do.
Well, he's different.
But there's also the relationship you have. It's like, whereas if you're, it's hard to start parenting your parents. It's hard to do that. And I've heard in some circles too, it's like, well, we, it's not parenting, it's a different thing, but in some ways it is, and that's really
my
hard.
Mom, I found that she was talking about me behind her back, my back.
Yeah.
So, but
also very normal.
Yes, very normal. But again, not really having had that happen before. It was my mother. These were all new things that were coming up. But for some reason, I am a strategic type of person, and I find different approaches can bring different outcomes. So she's complaining about her memory. Oh, it makes me so mad. I can't remember where I put that. That's hard to hear.
Right.
It's hard to hear all the time. And so we go to the doctor, and she's taking Norco. Okay. When she came to live with me, she was on so much Norco. I was shocked. 10 milligram, not the 5s. So we go to the doctor and I say, hey, doctor, do you think that Norco may have something to do with the memory?
Right.
Okay. Listen, that's how I get in the back door.
Right.
He goes, oh, yeah. And so I say to Mom, maybe that's something you should consider cutting back on.
Yeah.
Especially since you don't remember if you took it or not.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So how do you feel about this? And so I will say that my approach is often suggestive, but letting them make the decision, not just say, I'm taking your pills.
Right.
You can't even remember. That's very critical. Let her become a part of the decision. She goes, well, I guess you're right. Mm-hmm. I'm going to sell it big time. I'm going to sell it gently. And she said, okay, honey. But then she forgets that she told me that. Or she Nana told me that you're treating her like a child.
Right.
So I'll go to my mom and I say, hey, Mom, remember, I won't say what they said.
Right.
Mama, remember when we had that talk about your memory and the medicine? I'll kind of just have the whole thing fresh, like it never happened before. So that's why I have your medicine, right? Mm-hmm. How do you feel? That's still working, right? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Great. So
there's a lot of repeating. There's a lot of saying the same thing over and over, and it is exhausting. But if you, like you said, once you know to expect it, you just kind of like, we're going to have the same conversation every Saturday, like when I go to my mom, we end up having the same version of the conversation that we had last week.
And try to make it sound like it's the first time.
Right.
That's the hardest part. Because if you don't, it's going to be condescending. Yeah. It's going to feel bad and you're going to walk away. Then you're going to feel guilty because you just like bashed your mother over something. But, repeating things is not, if you think of it as, there's a lot of jobs where you're on the phone and you're saying the same. How about the waitress or the server that says, ranch, whatever the dressing is. What kind of bread do you have?
Yeah.
It's part of the job. It's just part of the job.
It's just part of the job. Now, every time I repeat something, I'm going to think ranch, Thousand Island, blue cheese, cattle.
Muffin, sourdough, wheat toast, Yeah. What kind do you have?
Oh, my goodness.
We just told my niece, and then I go, I'm sorry. What did you say those were? But
and what we really want, we know we want like the ranch dressing or whatever, and it's like we make them say the whole thing, and they're like, you just want ranch. Nobody gets anything but ranch.
I know. I'm not even honest. I always end up with the same.
Oh my goodness!
I'd like to go back to grieving.
Well, I was gonna say, what do you want to make sure that people hear from you today? What is pulling on your heart that you're like, this is what I want caregivers to know? And just know, Jodie, this is not your one and only time on the podcast. I'm going to have you back.
I love that. I love that. Because, there's so many dynamics.
Right.
So many dynamics. But today, I would like to recommend a book.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. It's called Your Erroneous Zones. It's by Dr. Wayne. I know it sounds
Love it.
Erroneous by Dr. Wayne Dyer.
Okay.
Now, one of the points that I want to make about this book is that he talks about you're born and you have a blank canvas. Mm. And everybody in your life starts painting that canvas as to who you are and who you become. So you have your mom, your dad, your preachers, your teachers, your siblings. Everybody's going to start painting how you're going to be making your decisions for the rest of your life. Well, Dr. Wayne taught me that I could erase some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have to believe that way anymore. I don't have to be that way anymore. I could change that to something different. And that's part of the reinventing, being open and willing to change. And, ask yourself, why do I continue the same behavior if it hurts me?
Right.
Why do I continue that? You may not be able to answer that right now, but that's sort of the seed that you want to present in caregiving and in life. Why do I keep doing that if it hurts me? How can I change? Are you going to have a light bulb? Maybe, maybe not. But at least that's the seed that can get you going. And change is really hard. So as I mentioned earlier, you're so deep in the soup that if someone said, well, how can I help you?
You don't know.
I find myself going, I have no idea. Like, where do give me a pencil and paper. Let me write down what I can't even answer the question.
Right. You don't even know what you're doing. You don't know. Yeah. There's so many.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And someone says, that used to happen to me at work where my boss would give me all these assignments and I would finally come to him and I go, here's the list of things you want me to do. Which one do you want me to do first?
Right. Right.
or he'd say, well, what do you need help with? I go, oh, I have to get back with you. I have to get back with you on that.
Right.
Let me think of all these things because I don't want to miss this opportunity
Right.
to get it right, if you're going to help me.
If you're really going to help.
So it's important to be aware someone can help you. Again, reach out and find common ground. Super important. Find common ground with Jeanette. I mean, this care, I had never heard of this before, Jeanette, what you're doing.
Well, I hadn't either.
Yeah. And I'm just very fortunate to have, that our paths crossed.
Well,
it's so completely life-changing. And how do you do it? How do I change?
Yeah.
Like the 10-minute phone call to Dad. Is that something that will work for you?
Yeah.
Find all these little ideas and things that you could do. You also talked about, I can't, and there's a lot of that going on. I mean, some people now will use that phrase, I can't, right? That's a popular phrase. I just can't. I can't. Just it's a funny phrase. But how about, instead of I can't because
right.
I have nobody help me. I have da-da-da-da. My mom da-da-da. My mama. Change that just to say, how can I?
Right. Or what can I do?
What can I do? How can I do it? Maybe, and start trying things. And the only failure really is not to try.
I agree.
That's the failure. You're so exhausted that you just don't even have the energy to try something new. That's how I came to the Facebook group, Working Daughter. I was defeated and depleted. I couldn't create anything.
Right.
I couldn't create anything. I had no oxygen.
Yeah.
And so when I came in community, it was like a breath of fresh air. So can I do everything they're suggesting? Do I want to? Does it fit? No. Right. But there might be some little thing in there that I could add to my little box of tools.
That's right.
Once you make the decision to be a caregiver, whether you feel there is no choice, decide what you're good at and what you're not good at. What are your gifts? Like, okay, mine is finance. Mine's a pep-talker, cheerleader, right? I know what my gifts are and I know what they aren't. Forgive yourself for what you're not good at. Please forgive yourself for what you're not good at. Those are going to be the hardest things to do, especially if you don't have any help. Just forgive yourself for not being perfect. And accept that no one can be good at everything. Nobody can do it all. So if you feel like you're falling short, okay, you're falling short. I mean, you can't.
Right.
There's some way, things that you just don't have the capacity, just like these people around you. You can't do everything. And see what you can do to learn how to outsource.
Yeah.
Just give me, I just told a good friend of mine, very good friend of mine, I messaged it to you, Jeanette. His mother-in-law, his ex-mother-in-law has dementia. She's like 90 years old. And the daughter is taking care of her. She needed to go do something. And so George and his son, which is sweet, we're going to go babysit, right? I said, George, maybe you could offer her like 4 hours a week, like a half a day every Friday. How do you think that would make her feel?
Yeah.
So I was talking to him about giving something to her because I felt like he had the capacity to do that. And he already expressed that he, felt bad for her. Try that and see, because when a caregiver has time carved out, anybody, I mean, if you have a vacation coming up, you're going to be looking forward, something to look forward to. Just, something, try to find somebody who can step in. I mean, obviously, if they're in a facility, you may not need to do that, but definitely go ahead. You want to say something?
Well, what I was going to say though, is that's a key thing. And, that could be a whole other episode, is like, it's easier for me to take the time when I know it's coming. If I've already planned to go see my mom and go see my other loved one and deal with this and deal with that, and then you say you're going to go, it's like, well, I still have to go because I've already like rearranged my day to do this. So could you go on another day? Or, it's like one of those things. I think that's really great that, in addition to this one time that she asked for, like maybe planning it ahead. I love that. But I love how you are so, one of the reasons I love having you in the Self-Caregiver Community group is that you are such an encouragement to other people, and you are able to step in and remind us that we're not alone. You encourage everybody to, you have that great balance of being a natural, gifted caregiver, but then also having a really strong self-care practice yourself and hobbies that you enjoy that have nothing to do with caregiving. Well, I don't know, tending to plants, maybe a little bit like caregiving, Jodie. But
yes, I am. But Jeanette, it didn't always come easy.
Right.
I had to overcome a lot of, and learn. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Reach out, get just this little visual, push that stinking idea out or that thought that you keep having and put something new in there. And honesty, like you said a few minutes ago, just be honest, like I was with my mom. Hey, Mom, remember when we talked about your memory?
Yeah.
And how maybe taking less medicine would help, and then you couldn't remember if you took your pill. Yeah, I remember. See, that doesn't apply to everyone because some people, your loved one can't talk or whatnot. Right. But the concept is there because what you're doing is you're telling the truth. Yeah. Just tell the truth, and you can be firm but kind. There's a song in The Sound of Music where the mom says, she's going to take care of all these 7 kids. And she says, heaven help me, I will be firm but kind.
That's right.
And I always love that philosophy because you can be firm, but also be loving about it.
And grace. We talked about that at the very beginning. Grace for yourself, grace for your loved one, grace for those, if they're in a facility, grace for those people that are working. Grace. Jodie, we have had a wonderful conversation today, but it is time to wrap up our time. And I will have you on again because your wisdom is so valuable, and your knowledge, like you said, knowledge is power. And the more knowledge of your knowledge that we can share with other people, I'd love to do that. And of course, if anybody wants to actually chit chat with Jodie, if you join the Self-Caregiver Facebook group, she's in there. So I'll tell you about that here in the outro. But thank you, Jodie, so much for joining me today, taking time. We're on different coasts here in the United States, so we had to do some major time zone math, but we figured it out.
We did.
All right. Thank you for joining me today. From Guilt to Good. From Guilt to Good podcast is a proud member of the Whole Care Podcast Network. To access additional self-care resources to help you feel good, not guilty, check out the show notes or head to theselfcaregiver.com. Subscribe now and join me in going from guilt to good as you rediscover your worth, reclaim your health, and get back the life you've been too busy to enjoy. And if you've enjoyed this show and this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review. Your feedback matters. Me and Jodie and the rest of the Self-Caregiver community, we're redefining self-care for caregivers one episode at a time. And until next time, remember, you are worthy of the same care you give others.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.